Pharmaceutical Processing, in conjunction with INTERPHEX, presents INTERPHEX Live.
We're going to talk with an old friend of mine, ex-FDA Joe McGinnis. He is currently now the Senior Regulatory Compliance Advisor at J&J and Newark office, right? Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's how I met Joe the first time, on good circumstances. Okay, good. That's why we're still friends. Anyway, having said all of that, what we're going to do, Joe and I, we talked about how we want to present that, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to jump back to the, as a point of reference is, how many, the approvals, the warning, let's give you a retrospective in, that we talked about in 2018, okay? So we should go over some of them stats, all right, that we talked about. So you want my list or yours? You good?
I have it also.
There
Yep.
you go, let's go.
Thank you very much for having me here today. As Russ said, I worked for the FDA for 21 years. The first 6 years as an investigator, then 10 years as a compliance officer, and then the last 5 or so years as the Director of Compliance in New Jersey District. Been with Johnson & Johnson for about 4 years. Loved both jobs. Absolutely loved working for the FDA. Absolutely loved working for Johnson & Johnson. Although Johnson & Johnson is a little bit bigger, 135,000 employees versus the FDA, which has maybe 13 or 15,000. So, looking at the numbers, the agency, such a great agency, regulates 25 cents out of every consumer dollar. Very important. And when I used to give talks for the agency, I would always end with saying something to the effect that you should help investigators when they come out to your facilities. And, there'd be a group of however many vice presidents and directors of the companies. And, I would see some of them maybe put their heads down or whatever. But, when you say something like that, you have to believe that everybody is a consumer, right? Everybody. Even the agency people are consumers. Everybody that works for a company is a consumer. And God forbid you could have an accident on your way home today, be taken to an emergency room and given a prophylactic antibiotic injection. And you sure as heck would want the investigator that did the inspection of that facility, making that drug that you just got, to have done a good job. And that's why I say, when you're a consumer, you want a strong FDA. And I absolutely loved my 21 years there. And again, I absolutely loved my current job. So looking at the agency, there's budget constraints across all of the alphabet agencies, including the FDA, and everything has to be justified. So what do? I look at the numbers, and the numbers tell a story. Well, if you look at the 2016, 2017, 2018, and the first calendar year of 2019, the number of food warning letters has gone down from 87 to 48 to 27 to 13. How does Joe McGinnis know those numbers? You look on the agency's website, right? There's transparency data on www.fda.gov. In the middle of the page, you click on warning letters, and it brings up all of the warning letters that have been issued in a particular time period. So it's not an exact number. These are approximate numbers. Sometimes you have lazy compliance officers that don't upload their data, and it throws the numbers off a little bit. But for the most part, the numbers are pretty accurate. So when you look at them, you see that the number of food warning letters has gone down. Remember, 25 cents out of every consumer dollar is regulated by the FDA. The number of device warning letters is down from 20 in first quarter 2016 calendar year, down to 6 to 9 to 8 warning letters in 2019 calendar year. But there's one programmatic area that has remained the same, and that's the Center for Drugs. The Center for Drugs, when you look at the different types of warning letters coming out of the Center for Drugs, there's compounding warning letters, there's BIMO warning letters, there's GMP warning letters, right? 501A2B, the GMPs. The GMP warning letters has been relatively the same over the last 4 quarters, first quarters, back to 2016, all the way to 2019. In 2019, in fact, there have been 8 foreign warning letters and 16 domestic warning letters issued in first quarter 2019 calendar year, and that's a high number. In first quarter of 2018, there were 18 foreign and 4 domestic. The numbers were inverted. And in first quarter 2017, there were only 8 and 7 warning letters. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the Center for Drugs is doing their job, has not missed a beat. You know, with the current topic that for every new regulation, you have to remove 2 regulations. You know, we all heard that a couple of years ago. That statement had gained some traction. Well, with the Food and Drug Administration, I haven't seen it, and I certainly haven't seen it in the drug arena. So, to summarize, Russ, you know, what has changed in 2019? Well, the agency has reorganized a few years ago, and the agency is maturing in that reorganization, and people are getting more comfortable. And as they become more comfortable, I think we're going to see consistent numbers, especially in the drug arena.
Well, what about at the? I mean, you start. You know, I think a lot of people want to look at. There you go, the district level. So what are we looking at as far as difference at the district level in that case?
Well, for 40 years, even longer, the agency had their field dispersed geographically. There used to be 20 district offices throughout the United States. Now the agency has redistributed their talent programmatically. So instead of investigators in the old days doing a food inspection one week, then doing a drug inspection the next week, now all of the investigators in the field are in one programmatic area. It's a great way to do business. And actually it started back in 2002. The agency started with the Transformation Leadership Team. I see James Mason here in the front, and I don't know if he remembers, but the Transformation Leadership Team was the first group in the agency looking at reorganizing the way the field does their business. And from that first formative group in 2002, there were a couple other groups, and lo and behold, we had reorganization of the field a few years ago. So now in the drug arena, there's 4 divisions. Drug Division 1 covers the United States from Boston down to Virginia and out to Ohio or so. Drug Division 2 is in the middle of the United States, including Puerto Rico, all the way out to Dallas. Drug Division 3 is Chicago and Detroit, and Drug Division 4 is out on the West Coast in Colorado. So there's 4 drug divisions now, rather than 20 district offices like the agency had worked for years, for decades.
So, so they've changed that. So I assume that the investigators themselves, people there, that's changed along with the whole geographic thing? Or?
Each investigator, if they were journeyman investigators back in the day doing what I had explained, you know, they could do a food inspection one week and a device inspection the next week and a drug inspection the following week. Now they're only doing one programmatic area. They always do drug inspections. They always do food inspections. And the different divisions are split. Even though it's geographic in nature, it's programmatic, which is going to be much better, in my opinion, especially for the review of drug products moving forward.
Okay, but let me ask you this then. Is the investigator, is drug program, but is it specific to the type of drug? I mean, are dosage form driven? Is it biologic driven? How is that? They break it down like that as well?
They do not break it down, as far as I know. I mean, I left the agency about 4 years ago, but you know, every drug needs a certain expertise to review it. You know, you just heard the CAR-T. Mm-hmm. This place was overflowing when the CAR-T presentation 2 hours ago was taking place, and that's a really sophisticated new arena. So you need subject matter experts. The typical drug investigator, who might be right out of college, you know, isn't going to know a lot about CAR-T, but they're going to have somebody at headquarters that they can ask,
right,
and they can use their information technology to ask questions even at the same day of the inspection and get feedback from subject matter experts in headquarters as they do their inspection in the field.
Yeah, I asked that only because it can get complicated, and it can be complicated, but it also it's hard to tell when you're getting somebody's blowing smoke or somebody's giving you the data. So I'm glad to hear that one. So we've talked about this on a couple of occasions, but one of the things, and people continue to get hammered on it, is data integrity. So I think it's important, and we just for clarity, every year we visit this topic. So it's been about 3 years now, and it's always hot. So so let's talk about data integrity.
Yep. Data integrity is it's not only in the healthcare industry, it's in every industry, right? It's in the banking industry, it's in the automobile industry, and it certainly is in our industry as well. But data integrity is really, in my opinion, a misnomer. It's really about data governance. It's how you, control your data. We all hear about the Alcoa principles, attributable, legible, contemporaneous, and so forth. But data integrity got its origin back in 1984. There's specific dates in the agency. They talk about 1906 as the first Pure Food and Drug Act. Then 1932 or so, 100 children died from sulfanilamide poisoning, and we had a new drug FD&C Act. Then in 1962 we had the thalidomide incident, and now not only did a drug have to be safe, not only have to be safe, but it has to be effective. In 1984 we had the Waxman-Hatch Act, and that is the Drug Price Competition and Patent Exclusivity Act in 1984. And that allowed generic drugs to come onto the market in the United States. And it gave generic drugs the opportunity to not have clinical studies, but it also gave patent exclusivity to the brand name makers of drugs. What happened was there was an influx of applications, ANDAs, abbreviated new drug applications. There were so many that the agency had a difficult time. Many of them, I remember one specific, had substituted the brand name product as being their generic product. And this was known as the generic drug scandal in the late 80s. Out of that, the agency began their application integrity policy. Application integrity policy. Scrutinizing, every application and putting companies that were in violation in this application integrity policy. Well, around 1990, there were 4 people who developed the pre-approval program as we know it. Hank Avalone, Paul Duramo, Joe Phillips, and Dick Davis. Out of the Philadelphia district, the pre-approval program exists today. And that gave the field some say in the approval of applications. Not only did the agency, the headquarters, review, but the field had a chance to chime in. And the field was sending investigators out to review the accuracy and authenticity of the data that was submitted in support of applications. Back in the day, it was a trailer full, even more, of paper per every application. That's how voluminous the paperwork was when you submitted a new drug application. Well, now, in the beginning of the 1990s, the field started the pre-approval program.
Yeah, Joe, one of the things we're starting to see, and I've seen this a couple of times, by the way, where in a former life, I had actually worked with a firm, and we were doing an extensive development project, and for lack of a better term, we'll call the contractor guy, right, or in this case, another firm, they kind of tripped over their own data integrity. So to me, this got to still, and that's not long ago, all right? We're talking, reasonable. So the point was, I'm the sponsor. I got a CMO partner or whoever. How do I make sure these guys are not being either stupid or intentionally stupid? I mean, what do I got to do so that when the investigator comes, he's got a good sense? I mean, these guys, these people had to have been sending off, vibes like, we're stupid. I mean, how else did they get caught? I mean, so how do you teach these people?
If you hire a contractor, your company is responsible for everything that contractor does. When you start off in the FDA, you're given the case law that supports everything that the agency does and the investigators. One of the cases is the United States versus Parfait. And Parfait, back in 1945, hired a contractor to make a product. To make a long story short, the contractor submitted a product in 1943, I think, and it was a very good product. It was a cosmetic lacquer for hair. Because of the war, they could not get this shellac, and they started substituting a gum. And it went through all of the courts. Many people, consumers, had problems with the product, and the courts held that the company, Parfait, was responsible because it used their contractor as a tool to accomplish what they wanted to get done. So United States versus Parfait establishes that you're responsible. So it's the same thing as if you had a different site making something. So if you hire a contractor, you need a quality agreement in place to make sure that if there's any changes, you're going to be notified immediately, and you're responsible, as if they're your employees. So that's the way contractors are.
So external auditing, I mean, been
Very
down
important.
this road, right? So questionnaires, what should I be doing?
Very important. And if you notice, when I was the director of compliance in New Jersey, we had tried to get some contracting language into our warning letters, and we just were not able to do it. And we had a couple of situations where we had contractors, we had violations, right? To get an action, to get a warning letter or any regulatory action, you need a regulated product, right? You need interstate commerce, and you need a violation, adulteration or misbranding. You need all three of those. We had all three for contractors, but we just were not able to convince the Center for Drugs to issue the warning letters to these contractors. In the summer of 2017, I began to see warning letters with contractor language. And specific companies that had hired contractors, if you look in and about July 2017, that language was in warning letters. And when I first read it, I said, oh my God, it finally worked, because for so long we were trying to do that. Now the names of companies hiring these contractors are no longer put in the warning letters. But for a while, for 6 or 9 months, the names of big companies were in warning letters of contractors. So that was different.
Right. So quality agreements, and what I found, one thing I found, Joe, is there's a quality agreement, but you got to have a working agreement. I mean, a quality agreement, that's good when the lawyers come in, but you got to have something that's on a day-to-day. I mean, to me, and the reason I think when we were brought into an investigation, it wasn't this hierarchy of looking at it was down to, on a day-to-day basis, how does this happen? What do you do? And to me, I think it just is a quality agreement, but there has to be a working agreement. Sort of like when you have a contract, but the guys on the floor also need some parameters in which to function, because your people and their folks have to work together. And that, I think that goes right down to PAI and prep, I would think.
Absolutely, Russ.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, so having said that, so has what the investigators coming into my facility looked for has changed? I mean, the old day, let me see your batch records, let me check it for the signature. I mean, hopefully we're beyond that now. What are we looking for?
There's variability, right? In anything that's done, there's variability. You could get a seasoned investigator come to your facility and knows the background that I know, right? Then you could have a brand new investigator right out of college who doesn't have, the knowledge, skills, and ability that others might have. So the variability is something that, is difficult to deal with, but it's inherent in the process, so you got to live with it. So if you get somebody that you're describing who knows the ins and outs, you're going to have a pretty thorough investigation. Yeah,
but I've always found that a seasoned pro, I'd rather deal with them than somebody ask me questions in ignorance. You follow me? To me, that's dangerous, because you're not really sure where he's coming from at that point. It's not that that's where the misunderstanding emanates from. That's why I asked. If we're going to talk about a certain technology, I think they got to be somewhat fluent, or at least be able to get on the phone and become fluent, all right?
Let's talk about data integrity. Now there's training programs at the agency for data integrity, right? The investigators are being trained. Well, you can tell somebody, that, these are things that you look for. And if you're not a very experienced investigator, you might see something that you believe to be a data integrity situation, but it's really not. You know, it's really a one-off. You know, somebody had something written down on a Post-it note that they shouldn't have, maybe their password or something like that, and the investigator sees that and runs with it and thinks that this is only the tip of the iceberg and continues to delve into data integrity issues when that is a good company, a really good company, and doesn't have any data integrity issues, but you've given the appearance to that investigator that there might be something there. So how did this happen? Well, I talked about the late 80s and the early 90s. In all of the 90s, up to 2005, very little incidences of data integrity. Remember, data integrity, right? We have sloppy, stupid things that we can correct. Post-it notes on computers, you know, other things that can easily be corrected, all the way to, you know, like a racketeering, influenced, corrupt organization, right, who is deviously manipulating their testing to you know, have passing results when failing results. That's way over here. In my experience, 21 years with the FDA, I saw that twice. Okay, I saw it in 2005 when I was a compliance officer during a very big generic drug company having you know, criminal activities. You know, 4 supervisors wound up being indicted at this generic company and went to jail. So I saw it then, and I saw it at a small generic company. 21 years, I saw it twice, all the way over here. Everything else, the other 99.5, is not, you know, the conspiracy theorists.
Right. But the pain's still there.
But the pain is still there.
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
let's remember. You know, Joe talks about that, but from a sponsor standpoint, that's going to be all right. So nobody's going to get dragged off the jail, the field, the marshals are not going to come. But the answer is, you're still going to have the pain.
Yeah.
So stupidity and stick-it notes, and that still brings them home.
Yes.
It's the severity, and the assumption is that could be over here on this side, right?
And it could be. That could be the tip of the iceberg. So
Right.
you have to investigate it. You have to, you know, as we used to call it, pull the string. You know, keep on pulling the string.
Yeah.
Keep on asking questions.
So, so obviously, you know, at J&J, I'm sure you guys, you know, whatever, outsource, or you got a PAI coming. You know, what steps do you give these guys? I mean, if these, say you're outsourcing something, what guidance do you give them, Joe?
You know, whenever you know, whenever you have a situation that you want to prepare for, you want to bring in your subject matter experts. You want to be ready. You know, on a typical pre-approval, you're asking, you know, an FDA investigator will ask for 3 basic things: product development report, validation protocol, and all correspondence with the center regarding that application. Start me off with those 3 things. See where that takes me. I could even ask for that ahead of time, and that you know, will give me a good basis for my inspection. When you're on the other side of the table, you know that those 3 things are going to be asked for. So it's a good starting spot.
Is it customarily that if you got a development report, that author should be available? I mean, does it get to that, or?
Not really,
No?
or
Okay.
somebody with a level of intelligence and experience that
Right.
can answer the questions appropriate.
I got it. Okay, because I think that's the extreme. I mean, you can wind up queuing up 20 people in the back room. That's kind of this. That's not a. I don't think that works either. That's where I'm at. You know.
You could have too many people, too many.
Yeah, I
folks.
mean
Yeah.
that's the key. Right. So well, having said that, what do you think is a good PAI team? Like, I'm a sponsor. Who should I have?
Well, having done many pre-approvals back in my time,
Right.
you know, I could go in and give a mock inspection. I could go into a site and do a mock inspection and have you know, our people subjected to the types of questions that might be coming.
Okay.
Or, you know, like I said, the variability in investigators' level could be where this is overkill, you know, but we still prep, you know, knowing that the inspection is going to happen. You know, there's PDUFA dates and GDUFA dates that are going to be met, and you know, when you know something's going to happen, it's always wise to prepare for it.
I got you, but what sounds to me is like on the sponsor side, they should take the same approach,
Absolutely.
right? And that is the guys on. Okay, yeah. So you get into this. You got the point person you're sitting with, but the bottom line is, if the discussion elevates to a certain point, that SME's got to be readily available. I think that's But they don't have to be sitting in the next room. I think that's overkill. I've seen that way too many times.
You know, now with the agency having the case management system, right, just was a few years when I was there, they have the ability to upload a document and have a subject matter expert review the document and ask informed questions, questions that a typical investigator might not be able to ask on their own.
Right.
But now having the subject matter expert a couple 100 miles away at headquarters, I think it's a great tool to use.
I think both ways. So let me ask you this question then. So you got a mock inspection. Obviously, I mean, there's no mystery to the timing. Like you said, we got a PDUFA date, you filed it. I mean, our approach, when I worked for Novartis, we filed it, you should be ready. Believe it or not, our approach is if I filed it the beginning of the month, we should be ready to stand for an inspection within 30 days. So when we filed it, we already got all our ducks up. That's the way we played the game, all right? There was no fooling around. So, but having said that, it might be an extreme. So to me, let me ask you a couple of questions then. Who should conduct it? Who's the lead guy? And if you're going to do a mock inspection, who runs it? You know?
Right, and my advice to you is somebody with experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who, isn't doing this for the first time.
Right.
Somebody who's a subject, you were the subject matter expert at Ciba-Geigy
Right.
for tablets back in the day when I did an inspection there.
Mm-hmm.
So you would be readily available for questions regarding that product, if it was that product.
Right.
So somebody with experience to lead the inspection and your subject matter experts to answer any of the in-depth questions that might come, whether it's that day or the next day.
Right, and I think where it's shifted is, right, that's the way we used to play the game, but I think over the years what we found was that was a QA function. That became a regulatory function. That's your point person. And I became a resource for that. So the question really is, who's playing the bad guy, though? You know, who's the heavy? So who do you do? You send in an SME from within your organization that's a hard ass, or what do you do?
Well, maybe you have somebody who's done this before in a prior life.
Yeah.
Maybe, and for other companies, maybe they need to hire a consultant.
Right.
That's a way to handle that situation.
Any idea about logistics, or in other words, if I'm in East Hanover and the place I'm going to have inspected is in, I don't know, Gainesville, Georgia, or whatever, should that be? How do we go about that?
Everybody's got budget constraints for their travel, right? But today, via Skype, or any of the other ways to conduct interviews over the internet, there's no excuse for not doing it. Whether you're there in person or not, that's not an excuse.
Right. I would even think that the walkthroughs using new augmented reality's got to be a way to go. I don't think we've gotten to that point yet, but
you're close. Google Glasses are there. Some companies are using them, and you see what you would normally see if you were on site.
Was it you and I were talking? You guys, did the agency use the drone on a warehouse inspection? Was that?
I was not
no,
part of that
I don't
conversation.
know where I got that. It was some. I don't know if I had heard that a cavernous warehouse, so they used the drone. I guess it might have been part of the mock inspection, but I thought it was pretty neat. Anyway, yeah, but that ain't in my job description. You know what I mean? I can't drive a car properly, let alone a drone. Anyway, so what a lot of guys do you do a storyboard? What's your recommendation? A lot of companies spend a lot of time doing a storyboard. What if? Here it goes. What should we be doing? I don't know. We used to do this all the time. There was a logic set out. And there was all this what ifs, fishbone diagrams. I mean, what do you think? Is that overkill again, or what?
We don't use storyboards. We don't call them storyboards, but we go through our whole process, and it's a very systematic approach with very experienced people, and it works well. Other companies have their own way of doing things. When I first came to Johnson & Johnson, it's like learning a new language, and learning the personnel. Having been at the FDA for 21 years, I knew the people, most of the people. I knew the positions. I knew the knowledge, skills, and ability of many of the people. So it takes time to learn that when you move to a different organization.
So I guess with the backdrop of because we always bring data integrity into it. So, and considering most inspections are based on risk analysis, so what's the sore spot? Is it, we going to go straight to data integrity, or are we going to go straight to the development report, or what do you think?
Well, data integrity is going to be part of every pre-approval inspection, right? They're looking to see if the data that has been submitted in support of the application is authentic, right? So yeah, that's going to be part of every inspection, GMP, pre-approval, whatever. Just looking at some of the numbers, you know, in 2019 first quarter, there were a couple of warning letters that had data integrity. On the foreign side, many of the warning letters have import alert language. Like I mentioned, the contract language. But these data integrity remediation plans that are in these warning letters, this has been consistent. You know, for the last X amount of years, this is the same. The agency has been thorough and absolute about putting this language in those warning letters. So people who read a warning letter know what the remediation plan is going to be, and they're given, that's free consulting. You know, you don't have to hire a consultant. You have everything that the agency is looking for in that remediation plan.
Absolutely.
And it's consistent.
Yep.
It's consistent language.
You know, there was a time where, you remember, I think when we first started the PAIs, and it was a walkthrough. Show me where the drug was brought in, walk me from the warehouse, show me pre-processed weight. You remember that? I mean, that was an arduous task. You know, 3 weeks later, you were still at it. But now, let me ask you this. I mean, so between that and the fact that we've outsourced the stuff, so the question really comes down to is, I mean, if I got to show vendor oversight by waiving a QA or waiving a quality agreement, is that going to do it? Or you got to see more, don't you?
It's a different world. Back in the day, you know, I just take Hoffman LaRoche on Route 3 in New Jersey. They made the API. They made the product. They packaged the product. They shipped the product all from Nutley. Everything was there in one swoop. You could do one inspection at one site and see it all. Today, it's not like that, right? It's a different world. It's almost like virtual reality. You got one API supplier, right? 80% of it coming from a foreign source. You have a manufacturing facility. You have a contract laboratory. You have a packaging facility. You have a secondary packaging facility. Everybody in the application is going to be inspected for the pre-approval, right? To make sure all your ducks are lined up. So, you know, to say that, and then we just heard the CAR-T talk at 2:15. Just imagine now, you know, talking about cells and whatnot. It's a different world. It's an exciting world. You know, we're really on the verge of some real good breakthroughs, you know, and it's exciting to be a part of it. And I think we're just at the beginning of that upward trend. So to have a strong FDA, I'm very happy with a strong FDA. You want a strong FDA. You want somebody to be able to answer questions.
Right.
And
what we heard too at CAR-T is there's an ongoing discussion. You know, it's not going to be the one size fits all anymore. You know what I mean? If you have any history with the industry, that's a big change. Because not only are we finding that the technology may fall short in certain areas, we're finding that, you know what? Show me where, well, what do you mean, where does it come from? It's a one-off. You know, it's patient 1, patient 2, that's the way it works. That's our source. So, you know, how do you do things like supply chain? How do you do things like life cycle management? What we heard at the CAR-T discussion, life cycle management is now post-dosing through the life cycle, literally the life cycle of the patient. I didn't see that one coming.